Welcome to a new episode of the podcast Lead the Future, Change the Conversation. An unedited and honest conversation to create the future. I'm Arjan Visser, your host and futurist, and join me when I chat with my dear friend Benj Street on self leadership, future, and peers. Benj is a leadership and innovation accelerator, and I got to know Benj as a pioneer who ever always looking forward what is possible, always want to embrace the emerging future. So Benj, welcome being back in the
Thank you.
podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me again.
Well, the joy is on my side, and I hope to share it with you and everyone who listening, because I've got to know you as someone who really embraces the emerging future. And which brings me actually to maybe the toughest question about self leadership and prioritizing leadership. How do you navigate your own development amidst the busyness and the to do lists and the overflowing operational issues that need to be dealt with? How do you navigate that?
Wow, I think you're right. It's a really tough question. And I think if I had all the answers, it would be probably the end of my life already.
And a good book.
Yeah. One of the first things that comes to mind is you really need to know really clearly who you want to become,
Mm,
because in some ways everything else is a distraction. Um, or a diversion. But when you really clearly know who you could become, what you need to learn, then I think that gives this focus and priority to the to-do list, to relationships, to business opportunities, to team, to everything. Um,
yeah.
I think, yeah, but as I say that, I'm like, well, that's not a passive thing either, because that in a sense, the working out of who I could become is a continuous ongoing process, which has to be the top of your priority, and to keep working, leading yourself in that way. I know we've talked about that sort of inside out, but it really, to me, it kind of comes back to that, like the question you asked about, like, how do you, can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but how do you prioritize the self leadership? That the busyness and everything will always try and distract you from that decision, which comes from only inside yourself. You have to make a choice. Am I going to prioritize myself? Am I going to prioritize who I could become? And discovery, exploration of where the boundaries and limits of that go in your closest relationships, in your own private thoughts, private actions, and then from that place, the public thoughts, the public actions, the public voice.
Well, what I hear you say and how it resonates with me and even bring memories back is that it's so important to know who you want to become, where you want to go. Everything else that is not in line with that, even when it's your number two priority, can become a distraction
Yeah.
because it absorbs your attention. And then I imagine that actually what is on your to-do list is already filtered through that lens, because it doesn't contribute to where you want to go and who you want to become. Then actually the urgency and the importance of it is less, because it
Yeah.
gives you a kind of a measurement, a threshold, maybe that's the word, to hold it against. And that brings back a post that I saw on LinkedIn earlier this week, where someone asked questions about the future and fear-based questions. And when I talk with you about the future, it's always excitement and it's not fear-based. And the answer was, well, you have to be in the present, solve your problems, and create a better life. And my inner reaction was, that's nonsense. Because without that future perspective, you are seeing obstacles, make them problems, waste your energy on them,
Yeah.
thinking it's an investment, but waste your energy on it because maybe tomorrow they see not be relevant. That doesn't, and because your whole paradigm to perceive things as a problem to be solved is based from the past. So I feel like that's the flaw of problem solving. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know who I want to become. I know what's not working. Let's fix it. And then tomorrow find out, oh, I have to fix other things. So so I really love it that you start the answer with find out who I want to become.
Yeah, I've heard some people say, call it find your North Star.
Yeah.
There's find your compass, whatever it is, but really it comes down to engage your imagination to work out who you could become, and then start exploring. I think there's the invitation to explore that,
Yeah.
who you could become, explore language, explore actions, explore all kinds of boundaries of it. I don't think it necessarily means that you get rid of your to-do list. There's always going to be important stuff that comes up. There's always going to be urgent stuff, and urgent, important. We live in a busy, crazy world, and we don't live alone. We live surrounded by, families, society, and everything that we have to live in and exist in. We don't kind of just pursue our own
Well, maybe
almost
that
out of
that
touch from reality future. So part of that exploration is the working out of
yeah.
how does it interact with those I'm around. Sorry, you were
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah, and I think there is a layer, an extra dimension in that. Your North Star, your needs, your desires. It's another dimension than your wants and the things you have to do, your to-do list, your problems and your perception and your obstacle. Like they're two
Yeah,
different dimensions.
yeah.
Having a, a tension, maybe even be in a paradox together, but just start live with it.
Well, for me, one of the things that I find really helpful is that because I know that I want to focus on this, who I could become, and have time to play and explore in that space, and that's really time-consuming process. And it needs, in my experience, it needs uninterrupted, calm time um, to enable creative thought. I know, like, I'm overtired. The first thing to switch off in my brain is the creative side, creative thought. So I know that looking after my health, getting good rest, discipline to carve out time and space to have creative thought, however that works for you. Whether it's walking the hills, whether it's doing a workshop with somebody, whatever it is. There's so many different techniques. I'm not, don't think the answer to your question is list off the different things, because that's part of the exploration. You find what works for you. But because I know that, then it motivates me to just get stuff done that I need to get done, so that I can then create space to do that really important stuff. And sometimes you just have to put that time in the diary and do it, and have that time set aside in the diary. But other times it's, okay, I've got this huge to-do list. I'm just going to bash through it with this motivation that almost there's a reward at the end of it, which is to have that creative space and time. Because I love that space, because I know, there's, like, I've learned the reward, the connection and process from prioritizing that. That, the feeling I get about myself, in myself, from changing, from moving forwards, from moving and working out who I could become, and being able to look back, wow, 3 years ago, when I was in this situation, under this sort of pressure, I'd react like this. And now I've learned to completely do something different. And that's moving me towards who I want to become.
Well, I want to use that one. I want to use that one as a bridge, because reflecting back to 3 years and actually find insight about how you've changed, what you've learned, populating your memory with what you have learned and your new insights. On a small scale, I remember, and I want you to share actually part of how that process works. I remember you mentioned, like, when situations unfold totally different than imagined, how do you protect yourself from, I would nearly say, not condemning yourself, but actually finding the learning points that you don't want to get lost? How do you deal with that?
That's a good question. I'd be interested to know how you deal with it as well.
I just follow my friend Benj's advice.
There's so many dimensions to it, and I think each time that it's happened, it's been slightly different. There's an element to that which is the everyday, the small things that happen on an everyday basis, that no matter how you think you might be in control of your life and all this stuff, actually, sometimes life just comes at you, and you could have, nothing you could have anticipated could have prepared you exactly for that scenario. But then the other side is, actually, maybe everything you have been doing has been preparing you for it. So I think reminding yourself that there's a different perspective, and in the heat of the moment, I normally just react anyway. But where I've been stuck in the past is then, as you say, the blame. If I didn't respond in a situation that I wasn't anticipating, how I would have liked to have responded, then the temptation is to go back and relive it and just play back that negativity again and again and again in your head. And I think we've talked before about breaking out of that cycle. I remember the time when I closed down an international airport because of a not so great landing. And believe me, I replayed that landing a lot of times in my head. How could I have done it differently? Just to, different pressure on the foot pedal that would have not allowed me to veer off the edge of the runway. But what I did to get out of it was I shifted my perspective, sometimes it's very hard to stop replaying and replaying, but you can choose who and what you measure when you replay. And do you see that learning? Do you see what you've gained from it? And use that to break out of the cycle of self-criticism, which just locks you in the past. Or, change the perspective and see the hidden gold, the keys, the learning that you can take with you into the next situation of life. And maybe next time not replay 100 times, maybe only 99. Or maybe only once or twice, who knows?
Yeah, one day. Well, what I love about that is that actually shifting the perspective from the replay and finding actually arguments to and self-pity, self-punishment, whatever comes out of it, it's not fruitful. And you shift your perspective to, okay, there must be something good in all of this that I've learned that I'll take with me, so that it's not going to be lost. So next time, because I've learned it, maybe in the mistake, through the mistake, or by mistake, I've learned it. It's mine. Take it with me. So next time I build on top of that. And actually celebrating that small thing is really powerful.
I think it requires real courage to do that, though, to do that consistently, because at least for me, the temptation is one, either to wallow in some sort of cycle of, as you say, self-pity, self-criticism, feel condemned, and that's a pretty heavy load to carry. The other approach is just sweep it under the carpet, ignore it, look the other way. So I think this kind of middle way, which involves actually going back over it, facing up to it, but with this shifted perspective, almost like an exploration lens to go, okay, let's sift through this whole thing and find, the hidden gems. I keep using analogy, but find exactly what is in there for you to learn and take forwards. It is, it's a process of hard work, and I think you can do it on your own. Processing with other people also helps. Other people who sometimes you just need to talk it through with somebody else to hear their different perspective on things, and it helps you just shift yours slightly. And it's one of those things, like that perspective shift from seeing the negativity to seeing what you've learned, or seeing the gaps in the gain, whatever language you use. It's 180-degree perspective, but somehow you can make it by just changing 1 degree. Just to, it can be the tiniest little shift. Changes everything.
Yeah, it changes everything. And like you said, like share it with others, like in a safe environment, with peers, sharing it, and actually in that safe environment, using their encouragement to stay on track. Like every time when you tend to disalign again from that 1 degree change, have that pushback. Some call it self-accountability, but that verbalization of what you want to celebrate, what you don't want to forget because you've learned it. And you asked me, and just for time's sake, I use the escape card. But one of the things that I'm testing myself and those around me is when something in another situation, like you initiated the landing, but sometimes people just do something against you, even. And when we had a horrible situation of being like actively cancelled, starting from the beginning with the question, what is the present I get out of this? Although it seems impossible, but shifting from finding arguments why it's unfair, shifting from that perspective to a perspective of I want to anticipate that something good will come out of this. Simply because I don't want to partner with those who have the actions against me, and simply because it will occupy my whole thinking, take away my creative thinking. What good will come out of it? And it needs courage. It needs a lot of energy and patience, and it's character shaping in that sense.
Yeah.
And not do it in isolation. Like we talk in the podcast many times about peers for your future perspective, but this is equally important. Have peers around you to stand alongside you when you do something that feels countercultural.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your honest, vulnerable answers. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for the question. I think.
I think ponder a bit about it. We'll come back to it. And I just want to invite those who listen, like, just reach out, send one of us a direct message, or use the link shown in the screen from the live recording, or in the comments of the podcast, businessrevivalists.com/guest, just to connect and sit in as a guest in a peer group, because it will change your life, but even more important, it will help you to prioritize your self-leadership amidst of chaos, amidst of crisis, amidst of distracting, competing to-do lists. So reach out, do yourself a favor, businessrevivalist.com/guest, and find out if this is the right group for you. Benj, thanks again. Looking forward
Thanks,
to our
Arjan.
other podcast.